Okay, let's dive back in. 1 Timothy 4, and in verse 14, Paul writes, and for us, it talks about a piece of Timothy's life and commissioning that we don't know anything more than is right here. He says, "Do not neglect your gift, which was given you through prophecy when the body of elders laid their hands on you." We talked about spiritual gifts and natural gifts and how do you know the difference. And I just want to touch on it again and say it is probably significant that there is a difference. But even with that difference, whatever it might be, whatever it looks like, however natural and spiritual gifts differ, here's the thing: don't neglect a gift. If you neglect a natural gift, what happens? Well, all right, let's just pick any natural gift. If you neglect it, there's a couple of things that probably are going to happen. One is, sorry, got a throat thing going here. One is you're likely to step backwards in your ability with that gift, right? And a second thing is, I know it seems silly maybe, but you not only are you moving backwards if you neglect your gift, you could have been moving forward had you not neglected it. So I don't know exactly how we move forward in our spiritual gifts. I do know that one of the implications here, though, is exercise your gift. If you, in order to not neglect it, I think one of the things that has to happen is you have to engage with it. And even now, some people would disagree with me on this, but that's okay with me. But I think even a spiritual gift needs a measure of development. Like teaching is definitely a spiritual gift. Needs to be developed. Prophecy, which is in New Testament terms much more often telling forth than to forthtell. Preaching and prophecy are often the same. If you don't practice, that gift needs to be developed. Certainly, if your gift is going to have its maximum impact for the sake of Christ, you got to develop it. There has to be some work on your behalf to get set up where your gifting, this gift, can do its maximum good. Don't forget the point of why did God give spiritual gifts? Why does God give spiritual gifts? Is because He intends for it to build up the entire body, the church, the family of God. Okay. The elders laid their hands on him in order for him to receive this gift, which, again, if I knew what the gift was, I could maybe have a little more insight into, okay, what might the process have been. All I know is I don't know of very many churches where elders lay hands on men and women, young men and young women, in order to bestow a gift on them. Now, notice this is not that the apostles did this. This isn't even, Paul doesn't even say, Timothy, remember when I laid my hands on you. Evidently, it was the elders I have a very high view of eldership. And when being an elder is reduced to just meeting once a month and making some decisions, I have a problem with that, because I think that's a horrible underdevelopment of a role that's so important for the whole family of God. Anyway, the elders did that. I'm not necessarily saying, okay, now from this verse, I've got this bee in my bonnet that we elders have got to start laying hands on people to give them gifts. I'm not there, but you can't just turn away from the fact that Paul said that's what happened. I'm sorry, losing my voice. But Paul said that's what happened with Timothy. Okay, one more quick thing on this. He doesn't cite, one of the things he doesn't say here is when the elders laid their hands on you just like they did everybody else. No, there's a real strong possibility that the elders laid their hands on Timothy as a commissioning to be, at the very least, Paul's partner and traveling companion. And with that, there was this intentional giving of gift. Okay, verse 15. Be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them, so that everyone may see your progress. First, be diligent in these matters. Diligent is I'm very sorry. Diligence, I wish I could remember. I think it may have been Howard Hendricks that I heard this from in a cassette tape that was a recording of one of his lectures or talks. But he said, the church suffers from a lack of vitamin D. Diligence. Can you imagine if Paul had not been diligent? What's your thought about where would we be as a church? Where would the gospel have gone? What kind of impact and influence in the world would it have had? I don't think it would have had much if Paul hadn't been diligent. But you talk about a bulldog, there he was. And he says to Timothy, you be diligent in these matters. In other words, you don't just flop them up and flop them down and do them when you feel like it, and don't bother when you don't. It's not like, that's not very hip anymore. But you know what? Hip doesn't matter. The things that Paul had written here, be diligent in these matters. It takes effort, intentional effort, to be diligent. And I agree, whoever that was, whether it was Howie Hendricks or not, we do as a church seem to lack vitamin D. We seem to not have this overriding passion to the degree that we just don't quit. We don't back away. Now, does that mean we're just in your face, always in your face? You can't get rid of... No, that's not what Paul is talking about. He's talking about stay with it. Be diligent. Now, you can't be diligent about everything. You're not capable. Nobody has that big a brain. All of us have, probably with the exception of people that have suffered traumatic brain injuries, all of us have pretty much the same number of billions of neurons in our brain. And so there is a limit to what you can be diligent about. You can't be diligent about everything. Now, I know I'm kind of now sounding pretty preachy, but maybe it's worth it. I know there are a lot of Christians, and at times I am one of these, who we are more diligent about making sure we get a digital video recording of a show that we're going to miss because we're at another event than we are at being diligent about the kinds of things that Paul's written Timothy. Sometimes we're more diligent about dozens of other things than about our walk with Christ and our progression in His grace, which one of the words that theologians in the Bible occasionally uses is sanctification. You're not going to, you don't need more grace. That's not what it is. It feels like, God, I just need more grace. Well, that's, I get the intention of that, and I've said it myself. Really, the bottom line is, you don't need more grace. You just need to be open to all that the grace of God wants to do in your life. And one of the things that God's grace wants to do for us is empower us to be diligent. Give yourself wholly to them. All right. We're in football season now where it's coming down to bowl games and the playoffs and all of that. And I'm telling you, the young men in college football who are making a name for themselves, they were diligent about it. And they gave themselves wholly to all it took to get conditioned and ready and able to respond to what was going to happen on the football field when they were playing. Moving forward, he says, so that everyone may see your progress. The point is progress. Now, it's interesting to me that Paul says, when you are diligent and when you give yourself wholly to these things, people are going to see your progress. You don't have to point it out. You don't need to have a pastor's progress Sunday where you give this exposition of all the ways that you've grown and matured and developed and progressed. No, the people will see it. Let's just now look at this whole thing in a kind of as a whole. Be diligent. What are you diligent about? What gets most of your efforts toward diligence? Where do those efforts go most often? Second thing he says is give yourself wholly to them. What are you giving yourself wholly to? Now, can you give yourself wholly to more than one thing? I don't know. But what I do know is if you don't give yourself wholly, if you're not diligent toward the things that truly matter, you'll run out of time and energy and every other resource in order to be diligent and to give yourself wholly to the things that matter. So application today is do an inventory. Don't judge yourself, but just observe. What are you most diligent about? And what do you give yourself wholly to? Then lay that up against these are things that have eternal consequence and significance. Or really, the only other alternative is not. Make it your ambition to be diligent and give yourself wholly to the things that really, really matter. I'll I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.